My 11-year-old daughter came home and her key didn't fit. She spent 5 hours in the rain, waiting. Then my mother came out and said, "We have all decided you and your mom don't live here anymore." I didn't shout. I just said, "Understood." 3 days later, my mother received a letter and went pale. It was just a normal day at work. Busy, chaotic, the kind of day that chews you up and spits you out in latex gloves. I didn't know it would be the last normal day for a long time. We were short-staffed again, half the unit out sick, the other half pretending not to be. I'd already been yelled at twice before lunch, once by a patient's family, once by a surgeon who thought sarcasm counted as leadership. I was running on 3 hours of sleep and one energy drink that tasted like liquefied metal. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. Normally I ignore it during rounds, but something made me look. Maybe instinct. Maybe luck. 6 missed calls from Hannah. Hannah, my 11-year-old daughter, my quiet kid, the one who apologizes to furniture if she bumps into it. She never calls 6 times in a row unless it's important. I stepped into the supply room, shut the door, and hit call. She answered immediately. "Mom?" Her voice sounded small and tight, like she was trying not to cry. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "My key doesn't work." I frowned. "What do you mean it doesn't work?" "It won't go in." "I think they changed the lock." "They?" "Grandma. Maybe Aunt Brittany." I rubbed my forehead. "They wouldn't change the lock without telling me." Silence. Then a sniffle. "Can you come home?" I glanced at the clock. Another hour before I could even think about leaving. "Honey, I can't right now." "We're swamped. Try calling Grandma, okay? Or Aunt Brittany. They're probably home." "I did," she said quietly. "No one's answering." "Keep trying." "I promise someone will open the door soon," she said. "Okay," but her voice didn't sound convinced. When the call ended, I stood there for a moment, staring at the wall of gauze and gloves, telling myself it was nothing. A mix-up. An accident. Then I shoved the phone back in my pocket and went back to work. 2 hours later, I looked again. 4 more missed calls. 1 text. "Mom, I think they're here. Please come." My stomach dropped. I stepped into the hallway, ignoring the beeping monitors, and called her. She picked up mid-sob. "Mom, they won't let me in." My voice came out sharper than I meant. "Who won't?" "Grandma. Aunt Brittany. They came to the door. Grandma said we don't live here anymore." I froze. "What?" "She told me to stop knocking. She said I'm being dramatic." I felt something heavy and dark crawl through my chest. "Hannah, listen to me carefully. Are you safe?" "I'm under the porch light." "Is it still raining?" "Yeah." "Okay, stay right there. Don't move. I'm leaving now." I didn't ask permission. I found my supervisor and said, "My daughter's locked outside." "Family emergency." He started to argue, but one look at my face shut him up. 5 minutes later, I was in my car, scrubs still damp from sanitizer, rain hitting the windshield in furious streaks. It's a strange thing, how quickly your brain can switch from professional to animal. I wasn't a nurse anymore. I wasn't a daughter. I was just a mother driving through a storm, white-knuckled and shaking. By the time I pulled into the driveway, it was almost dark. Hannah was curled up on the porch, knees to her chest, hair soaked through. Her backpack sat next to her like a loyal dog. I ran to her, grabbed her into my arms. She was freezing. "I'm sorry," she whispered, like she'd done something wrong. "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said. My throat felt raw. "You did exactly what you were supposed to do." She nodded, trembling. Then the porch light flicked on. The door opened. My mother stood there, wine glass in hand, like this was a social visit. "Elena," she said, surprised. "What are you doing here?" I stared at her. "You changed the locks." She sighed. "We needed privacy." "You locked my daughter out in the rain." "She's fine." "She's 11. Mom tilted her head, the same patronizing look she's had since I was old enough to disagree with her. "We've decided you and Hannah don't live here anymore." "It's better this way. Less tension." "Who's we?" "Brittany and I." Of course. Behind her, my half-sister Brittany leaned on the doorway, phone in hand, fake concern painted across her face. "Mom, maybe this isn't the best time." "Oh, stop!" Mom snapped. "It's been coming for a while." "Elena, you're an adult. You'll manage." I looked past them into the living room. Brittany's kids, Logan and Grace, were sprawled on the couch watching TV. My daughter's blanket was folded neatly beside them, the one with the little daisies she sewed on herself. Something inside me went very still. I didn't yell, didn't cry, just looked at my mother and said, "Understood." She blinked. "What?" "You heard me." I turned, took Hannah's hand, and walked back to the car. We drove without speaking. Rain thudded against the roof like static. After a while, Hannah whispered, "Are we going to be okay?" "Of course we are." She nodded, watching the headlights smear across the road. "Grandma doesn't like me, does she?" The question hit harder than I expected. I forced a smile. "Grandma doesn't like anyone, sweetheart. Don't take it personally." She almost smiled. Almost. The silence in the car that night was heavier than the rain. Hannah fell asleep in the passenger seat, head against the window, while I kept my eyes on the road and pretended not to replay every word my mother had said. "You and your mom don't live here anymore." "Right. Because throwing out an 11-year-old is just good housekeeping." I wish I could say I was shocked, but when someone's been teaching you who they are for decades, you don't get to be surprised. You just finally start believing them. That's when I realized this didn't start tonight. It started years ago. When I was little, there were 4 of us in that house. Me, my mom, my dad, and Brittany, my mother's first daughter. 5 years older, 5 times louder, 10 times more loved. If Brittany sneezed, Mom grabbed tissues and applause. If I sneezed, she told me to do it quietly. Dad was gone most of the time. An overworked hospital doctor, always somewhere between late rounds and early flights to conferences. When he was home, he smelled like antiseptic and coffee. He'd pat my shoulder, tell me I was a good kid, then pass out in the armchair with his boots still on. I adored him for it anyway. At least he noticed I existed. Mom didn't, unless she needed a target. She called me dramatic when I cried and ungrateful when I didn't. She said I was too sensitive, her favorite insult. Brittany could burn the kitchen down and Mom would laugh about kids being kids. I once dropped a glass of milk and got grounded for 2 days. Fair system. By the time I was 16, I was so desperate to get out that college looked like salvation. Even community college sounded like Paris. I thought distance would fix everything. Spoiler, it doesn't. When I met Hannah's father, I mistook attention for love. He was older, charming in the used car salesman kind of way, and I was 19 with the self-esteem of a houseplant. He bought me flowers once, so obviously he was my soulmate. A year later, I was pregnant. 2 years after that, he was gone. It ended the way cheap magic tricks do. Suddenly, and with everyone pretending to be surprised. He got a job in another state, or maybe another bar stool. I stopped keeping track. What I remember most is sitting in the kitchen with a positive test in one hand and a half-written nursing school application in the other, wondering how on earth I was supposed to do both. Turns out, you just do. You work, you sleep in 4-hour increments. You learn that crying in the break room counts as self-care. You also learn that being tired becomes part of your personality, but we managed. Hannah and I had a small apartment stacked with medical journals and unpaid bills, life held together with takeout and overtime. Not happy exactly, but free, and that was close enough. 3 years ago, Dad retired. He'd spent his life saving strangers. Now he wanted to save time. He called one afternoon, said he wanted to visit, catch up, make up for lost years. He actually did. He showed up every week with takeout and stories about impossible patients and miracle recoveries. Hannah adored him. He adored her back. They had the same quiet way of watching people, like they were cataloging every secret. Mom didn't like it. Every visit reminded her that I existed. Then he got sick. I won't name it. You don't need the word to feel the weight. All you need to know is that it came fast and didn't leave. Mom called one night, voice trembling in that way she thinks sounds fragile and tragic. He needs help, Elena. You're a nurse translation. Come fix this. So Hannah and I moved in. I told myself it was temporary, just until he got better, or worse. Those 2 years were the only time that house ever felt like a home. Dad was kind, grateful. I ran the place like a small hospital, charts, pills, meals, order. Mom floated around acting like Florence Nightingale, except her uniform was whine and denial. When Brittany visited with Ryan and the kids, Mom lit up like the 4th of July, throwing dinner parties that looked more like auditions for sainthood. The moment they left, the lights went out again. 3 weeks ago, Dad's body finally gave up. The funeral flowers hadn't even wilted when the house started to change. Grief does strange things to people. Some fall apart. My mom redecorated. 3 days after the funeral, she was already moving furniture, humming to herself, calling it fresh energy. She started with Dad's room, painted it pale yellow, changed the curtains, moved out his books. She said it would make a perfect space for when Brittany and the kids visit. Within a week, it looked like a showroom. New bunk beds, toys, framed photos of Logan and Grace on the dresser. Not one of Dad. Not even one. I remember standing in the doorway, still in my black dress, watching her roll paint like nothing had happened. She looked happy, energized, like someone setting up for a holiday instead of dismantling a life. I wanted to ask how she could do that so soon, but she beat me to it. Brittany and Ryan might come stay next weekend, she said. The kids shouldn't have to cram into the guest room anymore. They'll need their own space, she smiled, like she was explaining something sensible. I nodded, because what else do you do when your mother is already turning grief into a renovation project? After that, the visits blurred together. Brittany's family was there almost every weekend. They had their own keys, their own laughter echoing through rooms that used to belong to my father. And somehow, Hannah and I, who actually lived there, started to feel like guests. Mom called it healing. She said it made the house feel alive again. Meanwhile, Hannah and I stayed in the smallest room down the hall, our beds pressed against opposite walls. Mom called it cozy. I called it claustrophobic. One night I overheard her in the kitchen whispering to Brittany. "Rent's outrageous these days," she said. "It just makes sense for you to live here full time. We'd all save money." Then quieter. "Besides, Elena probably won't stay much longer." "She was only here for your father." I remember standing in the hallway, holding a mug of tea that suddenly tasted like metal. It wasn't even a month since the funeral, and already I was being erased. When I confronted her, she smiled like she'd caught me being dramatic again. "You said you were just here to help your father," she said. "He's gone now. You have your job, your own life. It's time to move on. Move on. Like grief was a lease and my time was up." A few days later, Jonathan Wells, the lawyer who handled Dad's affairs, called. "Just some paperwork to finalize," he said. I drove to his office expecting insurance forms. Instead, he handed me a folder. "Your father placed the house in a living trust," he explained. "He wanted to make sure it stayed with you and Hannah." I blinked. "What do you mean? Stayed with me?" "It's yours," he said simply. "He transferred it before his death. Your mother isn't listed anywhere on the deed." The words didn't register right away. When they did, all I could think was how fast everything had shifted. 3 weeks from eulogies to eviction. I thanked him, took the papers, and drove home with them on the passenger seat, unopened. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Because how do you walk into a house full of laughter and say, "Actually, all of this is mine"? I thought I'd wait for the right time. Let her grieve. Let her calm down. But 5 days later, she changed the locks. I didn't sleep after the locks. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Hannah curled on the porch, her backpack slumped beside her like a guard dog that failed. By sunrise, the adrenaline had turned into something steadier, rage with a plan. I made 2 calls before my coffee went cold. One to the hospital to take a few days off, the other to Jonathan Wells. He picked up on the second ring. "Elena," he said, already sounding awake. "She changed the locks," I told him. "Your mother?" "She's not my anything right now." There was a pause. Paper rustled. "Do you have access to the trust documents?" "In my car." "Good. Bring them. Come now." His office was 10 minutes away, not months, not a lifetime. Just 10 minutes and 1 red light. Jonathan looked calm in the way only people paid by the hour can manage. "This is straightforward," he said, scanning the pages. "The property's in the trust. You're the trustee. She has no legal standing, then fix it. I'll draft the notice." "How soon?" He checked his watch. "Give me 20 minutes. He typed while I stood by the window watching rain crawl down the glass. "Do you want to serve it personally, or shall I?" he asked. I laughed once. I've had enough doors slammed in my face for 1 lifetime. "You do it." He printed, signed, sealed, and handed me a copy. The ink was still wet. Perfect. An hour later, we were parked down the street from the house. Same sky, same rain, like the weather was stuck on repeat. Hannah stayed with a friend. No way was I letting her near that door again. Jonathan walked up the driveway, umbrella open, envelope tucked under his arm. I stayed in the car, engine running, wipers ticking back and forth. Mom answered almost immediately. Even from here, I could read her body language. Impatient, superior. The Queen interrupted. Jonathan spoke. Calm. Professional. He handed her the papers. At first, she didn't even look, just rolled her eyes and said something I couldn't hear. Then she read the first line. Her face changed. Brittany appeared behind her, holding a mug like she'd just been cast in the drama she secretly hoped for. She snatched the papers, scanned them, and started shouting. Jonathan didn't flinch. He said something brief, probably a polite translation of "you've been evicted," then turned and walked back to the car. Mom yelled after him, words lost in the rain. He slid into the passenger seat, closed the door, and said, "It's served." That was it. The drive back was silent except for the sound of the windshield wipers. I kept expecting to feel victory, but all I felt was the weight of exhaustion finally shifting off my chest. It wasn't triumph. It was oxygen. When we reached the corner, Jonathan said, "She'll try to fight it. I'd be disappointed if she didn't." He smiled faintly. "I'll handle any filings. For now, she's officially trespassing." "Good," I said. "Let her stand in my living room and explain that to the sheriff." He nodded once and got out, umbrella blooming above him. I watched him disappear into the gray before driving off. Back at my friend's apartment, Hannah was coloring at the kitchen table. She looked up. "Did you talk to him?" "Yeah." "Are we going home?" "Soon." She nodded, serious. "Grandma's going to be mad." "She's been mad since 1987, I said. "She'll survive." Hannah giggled, the first real laugh I'd heard from her in weeks. I decided it was the sound I'd fight for from now on. That night, I couldn't stop replaying the look on my mother's face when she realized the house wasn't hers to rule anymore. For once, she'd opened a door she couldn't slam. I lay awake listening to rain hit the window, steady and endless. It sounded like patience. It sounded like waiting for the next move. Because there would be one. There always is. The days after the notice blurred together. Rain again, lawyers again, paper again. Jonathan called that same night. "She's already hired counsel," he said. "They're claiming you fabricated the lockout." "Of course they are." "They also allege undue influence over your father." I laughed. Because caring for a dying parent is suspicious now. He didn't laugh. He never does. "I'm filing for emergency possession." The police report helps write. The report. I'd gone to the station that morning, sat under buzzing fluorescent lights, and told a young officer how my mother locked an 11-year-old outside in the rain. He'd typed everything quietly, then looked up and said, "That's neglect." "You did the right thing." Jonathan attached the report to the petition, and the judge signed the order 2 days later. Fastest justice I've ever seen. Mom's lawyer tried to stall with a motion full of bold italics and zero evidence. The court denied it before lunch. Jonathan called again. "The sheriff's office will set an enforcement date." "Probably within the week." "Already?" "You wanted quick," he said. That night I told Hannah we'd be home soon. She was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Are they still there?" "Who?" I said, even though I already knew. "Grandma and them." "No," I said. "Not anymore." She nodded, serious, like she understood something bigger than she should have to. When the email came with the date and time, 10 a.m., Thursday. It didn't even feel real, but the words were right there on the screen. Writ of possession, immediate enforcement. The morning of the eviction, I woke before the alarm, heart already sprinting. The sky looked like metal again, gray, restless. I made coffee so strong it could dissolve a spoon and drank it standing up. Jonathan had emailed the schedule the night before. 10 a.m., sheriff's enforcement, standard procedure. 2 words I'd been waiting for. Standard procedure. Because nothing about my family ever was. Hannah was at school. I told her I had errands. She believed me. I didn't want her to see this. No child should ever watch people she called family being escorted out by law enforcement. When I pulled onto the street, my stomach twisted. 3 cars in the driveway. Of course. Brittany's SUV, Ryan's truck, Mom's sedan. They were all home for the big show. 2 deputies were already at the door when I parked. I stayed near the sidewalk, rain starting to mist down, pretending to scroll through my phone like this was someone else's house. From inside came voices, sharp, familiar. Mom first, high and offended. Then Brittany, dramatic, wailing like she was auditioning for pity. Ryan chimed in with that useless tone men use when they think volume equals authority. One of the deputies knocked again, firmer this time. The door flew open. Mom appeared, hair perfect, fury perfected. She pointed at me across the yard like I'd been summoned from hell. "She's the one!" she yelled. "She forged everything!" The deputy didn't even look at me. "Ma'am, we have a court order." Brittany appeared behind her, holding her phone up like she was live streaming. "This is abuse," she said. "You can't throw out a widow." Ryan muttered something about lawyers and rights as he folded his arms. The deputy read the order anyway, calm, steady. He explained that they had 15 minutes to collect essential items and leave the property. 15 minutes. Mom laughed. The brittle kind. "You can't be serious." He was. They started pacing, arguing, knocking things over. Brittany cried harder. Ryan slammed a door. Mom kept repeating, "This is my home!" Like repetition could turn it into truth. I just stood there, halfway up the walkway, hands in my jacket pockets, pretending the rain didn't sting. I didn't say a word. When the first deputy stepped aside for them to pass, Brittany stormed out carrying a stack of clothes and 2 framed pictures, one of her kids, one of Dad, which she'd taken from his office. I almost said something. Then I remembered. Not my circus anymore. Ryan followed, lugging a box and glaring at me like he thought I'd enjoy this. He wasn't wrong. Mom was last. She paused on the threshold, turned toward me, eyes glassy with something between hate and disbelief. "I hope you're proud," she said. I wasn't. I was tired. She walked past me without another word. The deputies closed the door behind her, simple and final. The silence that followed felt unnatural, too thick. One deputy handed me the keys. "Ma'am," he said, "it's yours now." 3 words, heavier than I expected. I thanked him. My voice cracked halfway through. When their cars finally pulled away, I stood there alone in the drizzle, staring at the house that had been both battlefield and cage. I went inside. The air smelled like dust and perfume, sweet rot. A glass of wine sat abandoned on the counter. A jacket hung over a chair. It looked less like people had lived there and more like they'd vanished mid-scene. I opened windows, one by one, letting the rain air drift through. For a second I thought I heard Dad's voice in the quiet. "You did what you had to." I wanted to believe him. That evening I picked up Hannah from school. She climbed into the car, smiled when she saw the boxes in the back seat. "Are we moving again?" she asked. "Home," I said. The word felt strange in my mouth, like something I hadn't used in years. When we walked through the door, the house echoed. She ran from room to room, touching everything, like claiming territory. "This is ours again," she said. "Yeah," I whispered. It always was. It's been 6 months since the eviction. Hannah and I haven't spoken to any of them. No calls, no texts, no surprises. I blocked every number. Peace looks good on a screen. I still get updates, though. Small-town gossip doesn't need permission. Jonathan hears things through the legal grapevine, and a nurse I know from the old hospital still lives near Brittany. Apparently, Mom moved in with Brittany and Ryan right after she lost the house. It lasted about a month before things exploded. Mom started reorganizing their house. New curtains, new furniture, new rules. Ryan didn't take it well. They had a huge fight, and she locked him out. Cops got called again. He moved out a week later. Now Mom and Brittany live together, which everyone says is going great if you define great as 2 people passive-aggressively competing for oxygen. Their latest argument made it onto Facebook Marketplace comments. Someone screenshotted it and sent it to me. Mom was selling Brittany's old dining set. Brittany replied, "You don't even live here." Beautiful symmetry. As for us, we're good. Hannah's been helping me in the garden. She says everything grows faster when you stop shouting at it. The house is quiet. No new locks, no new storms, and best of all, no one's tried to move in. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough?